In this session, we're going to be looking at multi-active satellites or multi-valued satellites. I'm basing this on a blog written by Roland Vos. We collaborated a little bit on this, but Roland wrote the blog, and I really would recommend that you go ahead and read the blog because it goes into a lot more detail of what multi-active satellites are in the different scenarios. So I'm just going to pull out, what I thought was the most common bits of it. So there's two things about multi-active satellites. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview. But probably the most important one is that there are various options and consequences to consider. It's called multi-active, multivariant, or multivalued. And satellites is one of those areas where opinions vary. That I want to put that out right there, so especially multi-active satellites, some people would say, well, don't do it. And as Roland explains in his blog, there's three ways, there's possibly even a fourth way. But one of the things about multi-active satellites, if you think about it, the context, if you're creating multi-active satellite, the context doesn't quite fit the granularity of the hub. And that's one of the cornerstones of hub and satellites, is that the grain of the key of the satellite is the same as the grain as the key of the hub. So that's one of the things that you need to consider in which approach you take. And what is a multi-active satellite? Well, it's a satellite that has multiple active records, and we'll go through a couple of these examples for a given business key. And when we go through it, it'll make more sense there. So there are a couple of different multi-active patterns. There's about 3 options for implementation. As I said, there's possibly a fourth one, but I'm not going to be covering that. And what we want to try and do is we want to incorporate the multi-active attribute in a satellite somehow, or you can add it to an satellite, or there's another pattern there. So the advantage of this is it limits the table. So as we'll go through the 3 different scenarios, you'll see one of the first scenario actually will create less tables in your data vault, but it will actually add also you have to cater for it, and it adds more complexity in your ETL, especially when you start using multi-active satellite keys and driving keys on top of things like that. BimlFlex does cater for it, and I'll show you how it works. So from a BimlFlex point of view, it's not really a big deal. But if you're building your own patterns, or if you're using it, you just need to be aware that multi-active patterns there are impacts in it. The context is stored at a different level and more complex to query. So just bear in mind is that once you work into multi-active satellites, there are quite a lot of complexity in getting that data out again, and it does impact point-in-time queries. And in BimlFlex, if you have a multi-active satellite, you cannot actually put a point-in-time table over the top of it, because if you think about it, at any given point in time, you have multiple active records. So you just need to be aware of that fact and the impact of that on point-in-time queries. So let's look at scenario 1. And this is out of Roland's blog. This is his image that he's using, but I want to obviously simulate what he's doing and try and simulate that into in BimlFlex. So the first one here is he's saying that we're creating a satellite here where the plan valuation and the member surrogate key is part of the satellite, where you have a surrogate key, the timestamp, and then you add the plan valuation year to it. So obviously trying to simulate that in AdventureWorks so that we can kind of easily play with BimlFlex. So let me first look at what would happen if you did no modeling. If you look at AdventureWorks LT and you're looking at it, you say, well, I've got the customer table that joins to the address table. I've got 2 addresses per customer, and here's the address table. So I've got customer address, and address. Now, one thing that you may do if you have there is quite a number of these sort of data vault wizards out there, or auto generators out there. What would happen is that if I look at the structure, they would say, okay, well, I can understand the structure, and I'm going to go draw a data vault. And what one of the scenarios they may draw is a hub with a satellite for customer, a hub and an address for address here, satellite address here, and then they may have chosen to make this a link with an LSAT, or maybe a hub with a satellite, where the address type is in the satellite. So this could have also been a hub with 2 links out and an address, but you could also draw it as a link with an LSAT here. It depends on what flavor of auto generation you're using. Now, as I said, this may not be what you actually want. What you may want, if we think about scenario 1, is you may want to actually have the address connected to the hub with the address type sitting inside of this address here, so that you have the address type sitting here, and that's what the multi-active satellites is. So what you will end up with is a customer address type and then the address information here. So let's look at how you would actually implement that in BimlFlex. All right, so let me start off with just a very basic import here of metadata. So I've got customer address and customer address imported here, and I have the metadata for the tools here, sitting here. Now, one of the things that when you are building your data vault, and this is probably one of the things or the dangers of building a source-driven data vault, is that you don't apply any modeling logic inside of your actual data vault. And that's why all of the experts that I've spoken to agree that you should model your target first, and then you should map your source to your target. You shouldn't start with your source and try and generate your target from your source. Although that's what we're gonna be looking at, how we do that. So as you can see here, I've got customer, I've got address, and I've got customer address. So one of the things that I need to do is, as per the queries, I need to actually collapse the address and the customer together into an address table here. So what we will do is we will actually combine the customer address and the customer and the address table together here. And what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to use the join SQL table here. Just want to get to it here. And one of the things that I need to do is create a join statement. All right, so I've added in the join SQL, I've added the inner join here between sales address and customer address over there. And as you can see here, I'm joining source address ID to customer address ID. So the next thing I need to do is just give the from bit, or the address name. I'm saying I'm using an alias here of source for this, and I'm bringing these two tables together. So now I've combined these tables in a join statement. I can go and exclude this from the build, but I'm not going to at this stage. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to bring in the customer ID into this table here. And I'm going to bring it in at the bottom here. So all I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to grab this column here, and I'm just going to bring it into this, and just change this to the address. And the last one I need to do here is on the SQL expression, because this is coming from a different table. I want to say this is CA. Remember, I've got customer address here, and I want to say this is customer ID from there. So now I have the customer ID coming in here, and the last thing I can do here is I can now change this business key here. Instead of the address business key, I can change this to customer business key, and I can change this to customer ID here. And then last but not least, I now need to go ahead and pop this guy in here, and I need to reference the customer table now. So now I'm referencing the customer table, and I'm going to need to do one more little thing here in a second here. And okay, now the last thing I need to do is, remember, I've got the address type that I need to bring in here. So I'm going to insert another row here, and I'll fix this up in a second here. And I'm going to bring in the address type column here. Oops, that one there. And I'm just going to bring in the address type table here. And again, I'll bring this down from there to here. Excellent. Okay, and that's all I needed to do there. I now need to just do a couple more things here. So obviously I need to remove that, because that's just from my copying. But the last thing I need to do here is I actually need to go ahead, and I've got this is my primary key, this is my business key there. Okay, but what I need to do here is I need to actually say that this, remember, this is the multi-active key. This is the multi-active key, and it is now part of my primary key. Okay, so that's what I need. This is how we would define a multi-active in BimlFlex. We have a change type called multi-active, and we need to make it part of the primary key. And just for the purpose of making this, I'm going to make this a 700 and 701, just so it's at the bottom of the 701, just so that it's at the bottom of the thing. And then I'm going to set current sheet there. And one last little thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead here and change the customer address, because I don't want that in my I don't want this actually in my data vault. So I'm going to just say exclude this from the data vault just for the purpose of this modeling exercise here. And remember, this is going to be a satellite now. It's not a hub. And this is now going to be a hub. So in this version of BimlFlex, we've actually used to auto detect these things here. We've switched that off because we actually want we do want the customers to actually, or the data modelers to think about what they're modeling and not just make the modeling exercise automatic. Let's have a look. I might have made a mistake here in the modeling. Could not resolve reference. Oh, okay. So that's because this guy here is now referencing the address. So I actually need to go and exclude this from the model. So what I'll do is, what the error message I'm getting there is because customer address is referencing address that no longer exists. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say exclude this from the model, because I don't really need this anymore, and I'll just do a get all entities, and now this error should go away here. All right, so just before we go ahead and accelerate this and show you what the data vault is going to look like and how it's going to look, is I should look recap real quick. So I have gone ahead and actually fixed the metadata or added some metadata to it, where I've added a join SQL statement to bring the customer and customer address together. And then I've brought the metadata in from the customer address into the address table here. I've brought the customer ID and the address type. Actually, now that I think about it, I need to also add this as CA address type so that it knows to bring that into the SQL expression. So I need to bring in the customer ID and address type. And I am now referencing the customer table. Okay, so now I've made this a satellite. So I'm going to go ahead and just go into Biml Studio and refresh the metadata there. Let's refresh the metadata inside of Biml Studio and just bring everything in. And then I'll run the data vault accelerator just to show you the hubs and links and satellites here. So as you can see, I've got customer address sitting here, address table here. This is going to get staged this way, right? And if I now run the data vault accelerator over the top of this, I will get the structure that I want. So I'm just going to go and run this over here. Data vault preview. As you can see here in my preview, I've got my hub, I've got my two satellites. And then last thing I can do here is I can actually preview my diagram. And let's go and have a look at the data vault only. And there it is, the hub, my customer here. As you can see there, that's my multi-active customer. And that is exactly what I was looking for to do. So to do multi-active satellites in BimlFlex is as simple as just, as I said, preparing your source query so that it actually combines the multi-active parts of it, and then actually just define it on the column change type as a multi-active satellite. Right, let's look at the second scenario. So the second scenario, as explained in Grunt's blog, is where you actually go ahead and split out the satellites per address type. So what you would do, or per type. So what you have here is you have plan valuation 2016, 2017, 2018, and the benefit of that is obviously your context is now associated with the key. So the satellite, the context of the satellite is attached to the hub, so that they actually are at the same grain. So this scenario 2, the grain of the satellite is the same as the grain of the hub. That's one of the benefits of this. Obviously, as you can quite clearly see here, is you'll need to add a 2019 and a 2021. So again, the consideration that you need to make here is that the types or the multi-active portions of it, is that a static amount? So like in the case where we will look at, again, let's start off with this multi-active address, and let's just go ahead and try and do the same thing here where I have two addresses. And this is where quite often we would talk about addresses, addresses are multi-active, or you have multiple addresses per customer or per member or entity, where this quite often is not a variable amount. Quite often you have in multiple of your systems, you may have we only have 3 types of addresses. You have a billing address, a shipping address, and maybe a main address, or in this case I've got an office address and shipping address. So therefore creating multiple satellites could be a good option for some types of multi-active satellites, if that's the right word. So it really depends again on what is the portion that is multi-active and how you would split it out. So let me go ahead and show you in BimlFlex how we would do this. Okay, so what we're going to do is create that scenario where we have one customer and we have two address satellites here. So again, I'm starting at the same point. I've just got the metadata for the customer address and address in here. And what I really want to do is I want to create two more address attributes, one for shipping address and one for main office address. So now the easiest way to duplicate or duplicate the metadata, so I need the metadata for the address table twice. So I'm just going to go ahead here and click this clone table button. And actually what I'm going to do here is my target schema is going to be sales LT. I'm going to keep the sales LT as the same schema. And the table name here, I'm going to call this shipping address, right? So I'm going to just call this shipping. And I want to actually go and create a table, and I don't want any target columns here. What this will be is this would actually create source to target mappings between this table and the table that I'm cloning from. So I'm going to hit clone. And now I have a shipping address table here, and I'm gonna fix some metadata here. And at the columns level, I would have basically exactly the same columns as the address. I would have another table here called address BK. So I'll set current sheet here. I need to set the object first, and then I will go and set the columns. So now I've got that metadata, and I'm going to duplicate it again because I want to create another one of those. And in this case here, again, I'm going to do sales LT. And this time I'm just going to go and say, this is my office address. Okay, and I'm going to again untick this, and I'm going to make this, I'm cloning at a table. We use this functionality to, go from a source to dimension and a fact and everything. But I'm going to clone again. And over here, I've got my office address, and I'll just set current sheet. And again, on the columns, I have the columns. I'm going to fix this in a second. Now let's go ahead and fix this up. So the first thing we need to do is obviously, when we run the query, we need to be able to say, we need to go from something. Now, shipping address and office address doesn't go. So if I have select columns from shipping address, the shipping address table doesn't exist. This is sort of like a metadata entity and not a physical entity in the database. So the first thing I need to do is I need to say, hey, where is this table coming from? Now we can also use sort of inherit from object stuff, which is on the right hand side. But the easiest way to do this is just to drop in a from statement here. So all I'm doing is I'm saying, actually, this query that I'm going to need to get the data is from the sales LT address. Okay, and then the next thing I want to do is, as I said, I need to join the address. I need to join the address again to the, I need to join this address to the customer address to get the customer ID, because I need the customer ID to connect to the directly to the satellite, right? So I'm going to go ahead here and just drop in that inner join, but I'm also going to add the address type in here. Okay, and then last, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and make this satellites. So these are satellites, and that one is a satellite, and this is going to be my hub, right? And again, this is just a matter of the, and I'm actually just going to exclude these guys from the model, because I'm not going to really need them, right? So I'm going to go ahead here and just say I don't want to model this at the moment. Again, this is part of being agile, is that you only model what you want to model. So I'm going to go ahead here and say I don't want to model this, and I don't want this. Okay. And I go ahead and just say set current sheet here. And then just what I'm going to do is just so that I have only the metadata, I do a get all entities, or I could have just done a get current sheet here and then on the next one. And as you can see now, I have my customer and my customer address here. And like in the previous session, I'm now just going to need to bring in the customer ID and change the business keys here, right? So again, I'm going to just grab this. Actually, I probably want to insert my rows first. Actually, all I need to do is just, actually, I don't need the address ID. I just need the customer ID. So I can bring in the customer ID and just drop it over to the address ID here. And in the SQL expression, as I said, I need to again go and say, okay. And I do the same here, grab that, do this. And then on this address business key here, actually, I'm gonna just grab that because that's what I need. So I'll drop this into there, and I'll call this a customer business key. Okay, great. And then last but not least, I need to obviously reference the customer, because this is a satellite of the customer now. I need to connect this up here. Okay. So before I push this up, let me recap. I've gone ahead and created two, I suppose, metadata object or virtual objects here called office address and shipping address. I've given it a from SQL here to say that it goes from the address table, because that's the source of this query, and I need to do a join. So you could have created a view on the table. You could have done it many different ways, but this gives you a bit of a way to just add the metadata. And we're grabbing the main office and the shipping office there. The next thing we need to do is we need to now connect these satellites up to directly pointing to the customer, and I'm going to go ahead and do this. So now all I need to do is, again, go into BimlFlex and I go into Biml Studio and refresh my metadata and preview it again. So I'll close that up and I will go ahead and refresh my metadata. Okay, so what I did wrong here is when I cloned the table, I chose the object type of dimension and not of table. I must have missed that. So what it's doing is the dimension gets validated differently to just a straight old table. So let me just do set current sheet there. Yeah, I just want to point one more thing out that, again, I missed when I was doing it, is that when you hit the clone table button, it actually, the process for this has been designed that you actually want to clone from a source to a target. And therefore what has happened is it's actually dropped the target connection in here. And what we need to do is you need to set this back to the source connection, because obviously it's a source. And change the model object type. So I'll just do a set current sheet there again. So yeah, just I just made a little bit of a mistake there. So I'll go ahead here and now refresh my metadata again, and then I'll run the Data Vault Accelerator. Okay, great. So now I have these coming in here, and my Data Vault preview options are still correct. And if I run import the Data Vault Accelerator, as you can see here, I now have the hub, satellite, customer address. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like in a visual diagram. Okay, great. So let's look at the Data Vault preview. And as you can see there, it's just a hub with my 3 satellites, exactly what I was looking for. So again, using BimlFlex, it's fairly easy to take a source multi-valued table from the source and split it into its separate parts. Let's look at scenario 3 right now. Okay, so scenario 3 is where you create a keyed instant hub, where you have a hub and then a link and then a hub, which actually brings the membership plan and the valuation plan here together. And this is also sometimes referred to as a weak hub. I'm not sure I like that name. I mean, but it is referred to as a keyed instance hub. And what you're basically doing is you're creating a satellite at it's the same grain as the hub over here, and again you link it through the membership there. So let's go and have a look at what that would look like inside of BimlFlex. So again, what we would start off with here is we're going to start off with the same tables here, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a source query that brings these 2 tables together as a customer address, right? So you're going to have a table where instead of customer, you bring all of the columns into customer address. So you have customer ID linking to customer with address type, address ID, and things like that. So this is where the primary key then becomes the address ID and the address type together. The customer address type together becomes the primary key of this hub keyed instance, and then there's a reference between this. So let me show you what that's going to look like. So again, as we're going to do this, we're going to have the hub customer. We're going to have a link between the customer address here, same as in Ruland's image, between the customer address and the customer address SK, and then we're going to have this hub, this keyed instance hub, which will have a concatenated key of customer ID and address type and the surrogate key, and then we'll have a satellite sitting over here. So let's go and have a look at what that looks like and how we would do that in BimlFlex. Okay, so we're going to start off with the same metadata as before, and then we're going to work from there. But remember, in this scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to bring the address information into the customer address table, okay, and create that as a linked instance. So I'm going to start off right at the bat and just actually exclude the address from this build. And then in the join SQL, I'm actually going to go ahead and join, go ahead and join the 2 tables together. So I'm just going to go and join this join the customer address now with the address table here, and it's pretty much the same as what I've done before. It's just the other way around, and I'm going to go and say this is my source. Okay, and that's all I need to do here at the object level here, and I'm going to go ahead in the columns section here. So as you can see here with the customer address, I've got customer ID, address ID, and so forth going down here. I already have my link back to my customer here, but I need to remove a couple of things. I need to add a couple of things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to grab all of these columns here. Sorry, I'm just going to go back here. I'm just going to go and grab all of these columns that I want. I'm just going to grab these. I'm not going to grab all of them, just those columns there. Actually, I don't need the address ID. So I'm just going to grab those columns there. And I'm going to paste them in here at the customer address level here, because I want to add them to the customer address section here. And what else do I need to do? I'm just going to grab this down here. That's about right. I'll fix up some of this other stuff here. So this becomes 7. So that would be good. So I'm bringing all of these columns in. I don't need this. I don't need this again anymore. So I'm going to remove the business key here. I do need. This is the relationship between that. My customer address BK here, remember that this is going to be the combination of the address type and my customer now. So again, I don't need this column here. And then on this customer address business key here, we want to make sure that I have this and the address type here. Okay, so remember that's the concatenation that I was talking about. Oops. Type. So now I've got my business key there. I've got my foreign key to my customer, and I'm just going to double check a couple of things. I think that should do it, right? So this is exactly what I wanted. I want to have a hub keyed instance where the customer address business key is a concatenation of customer and address type, and I have my foreign key to my customer, or I've got my surrogate key going at my customer, and I have all the attributes. The only other thing I need to do, because I'm doing that join, I need to grab these columns, and I need to actually tell my system that this is a dot. All right, great. So I've added all of my SQL expressions so that this comes into the select statement here, and I have got all of that set up there correctly. So I go set current sheet there. And now, because this is a hub keyed instance, what I want to do here is I want to set both of these model object types to hub instead of setting them. So both of these here will become a hub, okay, because I want to have a hub keyed instance. And I'll say set current sheet there. I think I've done it on here. I'll just do it again just in case I've missed it. And again, I'll head over to Biml Studio and I'll just refresh it. So I'll close this diagram here and we'll get a new one. And what I want to see coming through here is I want to see 2 hubs and a link and 2 satellites. That's really what I want to do. Yep, so I've got my hub customer address, the link between the customer address and the customer. Again, these names you can go and rename these things, but again, we're going to leave that there. And there's my hub, satellite, and customer. Let's go have a look at what this would look like as a diagram. Okay, great. So let's have a look at the data vault preview here. Yep, and as you can see there, that's exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for the hub customer, and this is pretty much what it looked like in my diagram there. Okay, so again, that's the option 3, which is creating a hub keyed instance. So which approach should I pick? Well, it really does depend, but Roland Vos, his preferred method is scenario 1. The approach to follow largely depends on your personal preference and almost philosophical views. That's what he's saying in his blog, and it's true. Some people are really anti multi-active satellites for various different reasons, but it really does depend. Me personally, and with all of the projects that I've done with customers, doing multi-active, there's a couple of things that catches people out, and that's why I lean towards scenario 3. Although the scenario 1, we will actually, in future releases, we'll actually start hiding that because of the amount of problems that it's causing with customers not quite implementing correctly. And I think the reason is, and it's that last sentence there, that the reason seems to be that, and this is taken verbatim out of Roland's blog, is the reason seems that in these cases selected multi-active key, so when you're creating that multi-active key, wasn't immutable. So what I mean by that is that we have had a number of customers implement this, and where they would say, yeah, but that is part of the primary key, and that should never change. And then what happens is the source system actually send them an update or change to it, and then the whole multi-active pattern falls flat. In scenario 3, that would not happen. The scenario 3 would actually handle that better. But it all depends really on your view and your scenario. So hopefully what you've seen in this video here is that regardless of whether you're going for scenario 1, 2, or 3, BimlFlex can accommodate that from a modeling point of view. And that's really important, that whatever you do is that you'll need to be able to implement the right model that's right for you. So I'd like to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you watching these videos, and I'm going to hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.